up there, like I did to Jack that one night.
That's right.
I know people who want to get foot loans, and I can't find them.
They have that for senior citizens, Jim.
We're trying to clear them out.
This one was,
Right?
found him in the back somewhere.
Yes?
Good evening and welcome to tonight's Common Council meeting for December 10th, 2019. Clerk will call the roll, please.
Here,
Hanson.
Present.
Sedlacek.
Here.
Gilson. Hildebrand.
Here.
Wilson.
Here.
Fernsler. Nelson.
Here.
Let the record show we have a quorum. Next is the pledge. Please stand. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's council meeting, the last council meeting of 2019. Next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second, Alderman Sedlacek.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Nelson.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Fernsler.
Here.
Wilson.
Here.
Odekirk.
yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Sedlacek.
Yes.
Gilson.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Item 4, audience portion where we ask people to be signed in and be recognized by the chair. That's where you do the talking and we do the listening. And tonight we have two people that signed up. First one is Brian Yurgis. Brian.
Yeah, two things I wanted to mention tonight. One is it's Sabrina's 1-year anniversary with the city of Plymouth, as well as Matt Magel, our street superintendent. So both of them started a year ago. So tonight is the 1-year anniversary besides Christmas
Very good.
celebration. And then the second thing I just wanted to highlight, we didn't talk about it at committee or council yet, but you all should have received a communication previously from me related to the South Street Railroad crossing. And so far in the proceeding for the petition with the railroad, they have approved adding South Street to the 2023 safety program, which would mean that South Street would get lights and gates at this point in time. The entire petition isn't closed out. The complete review hasn't been approved. It sounds like from the Office of the Railroad Commissioner that probably a final determination won't be made until sometime in 2020 or 2021. But preliminary indication is it doesn't look like there will be funding or approval for Pleasant View or Highland initially. Of course, that proceeding has not closed out, but so far that has been kind of the decision of the Commissioner's office. And then we did submit to the special transportation program for those crossings as part of the DOT funding. For those other two, we modified our grant application to just submit for Highland and Pleasant View at this time. So just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. Next person that signed up is Jim Sedlacek. Jim.
Good evening. I just wanted to let the people of Plymouth know that I will not be running for city council in next year's election. So the most important thing is that someone from District 2 needs to step up and run for the position that I've held for 10 years and take over and enjoy the time that I've had. Thank you.
I think it would be appropriate at this point to break some of our standing policies and rules and say thank you, Jim, for your service to the council and the city. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
With that, moving on to item 5, ordinances. 5A, ordinance number 16, and ordinance creating section 8-2-5 of the municipal code of the city of Plymouth, Wisconsin, regulating the application and sale of coal tar sealant products. This was brought forward by Alderman John Nelson and City Administrator Brian Yurgis, and I'll ask Brian to lead the discussion explanation, and if John wants to chime in, he can, and then I'll call on Alderman Nelson for a motion. Mr. Yurgis.
Sure, I'd like to start out by referencing the ordinance. First, underneath, on page 1, underneath definitions, and it's A1, the definition for coal tar. It's a byproduct of the process used to refine coal. Coal tar contains high levels of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. And then going on the second page, item number 5 has a definition for PAHs, which are a group of organic chemicals that are formed during the incomplete combustion of coal, oil, gas, or other organic substances, are present at high levels in coal tar and are known to be harmful to humans, fish, and other aquatic life. So that's what we're talking about, regulating products with PAH is specifically kind of driveway sealants products. And Part B, the enforcement, this ordinance should be or shall be administered and enforced by the building inspector. So the building inspector's office would be responsible for any enforcement actions. And then C1 and 2, just want to spend a minute on. C1 on page 2 there says, except for those exemptions provided for in paragraph D below, no person shall apply any coal tar sealant product or high PAH sealant product within the city. So this that would be applying it within the corporate limits or the city boundaries. So this has no impact on anything outside of the city limits. And then, although that's the case, technically underneath point 2, it's possible that those products could be sold by a business within the city limits. If they're sold, it requires that this notice be placed at the point of sale or the location where this is on the shelf, noting the concerns with PAHs. And so it is possible that a business could sell the product and then it could be applied. Let's say maybe the town of Plymouth doesn't have an ordinance banning this. It could be, someone could apply it, I don't know if Walmart carries this, but that would be an example that if Walmart sold the product, someone could buy it that doesn't live in the city and still use it if it's something that's not banned in their community. And then just underneath E, the penalties, potential penalties are outlined in 1 and 2. Forfeiture of not less than $200, no more than $500. And then number 2, for commercial applicators, that or residential or commercial developer applying in a commercial setting, the forfeiture would be between $1,000 and $2,000. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alderman John Nelson if he has any other comments.
I'll go ahead and comment now. There's a couple things about coal tar. One is that it's known, the PAHs are known carcinogens. I've heard 2 figures on increased incidence of childhood cancer near areas where it's been used, 14% increase, and then I saw, I think in here, up to 38% increase in childhood cancer over areas where it's not used. I did contact a local contractor that seals driveways. They had already switched over to an asphalt-based sealant. They said it really hasn't been a major change for them. Said it's a little more difficult to clean the equipment, but other than that, they're pleased to be using it and not exposing their employees to PAHs also. most of the bigger box stores, I guess you call them, do not even carry coal tar products anymore. The asphalt-based products are the sealant of choice these days, and they're much safer. So, I think as of a couple of weeks ago, I think 21 communities in Wisconsin had approved a similar ordinance. Sturgeon Bay just in the last week or so approved it unanimously, and Green Bay, I think, is considering it in the near future. So it's a movement that's come about, and I think this is a good move for the city of Plymouth.
Thank you. With that, the chair will entertain a motion so we can discuss.
I'll move that we approve the ordinance, creating section 8-2-5 of the municipal code of the city of Plymouth, Wisconsin, regulating the application and sale of coal tar sealant products.
Second, Wilson?
We have a first and a second. Any comments, questions? Alderman Hanson.
I have a question on C2 where it says that they can sell it within the city. And our ordinance says that we're gonna regulate the sale. So why can we or can't we tell that companies can sell it within the city limits? Because we have it on our statement here that we're gonna regulate the sale and sealant, and then in this ordinance, they can sell it within our city limits.
Mr. Mayor,
Attorney
I
Faber.
think I can respond to that. So what 2C is doing is it's saying we aren't prohibiting the sale within the city limits, but we are prohibiting the application of it. So, and I think the city administrator used Walmart as an example. So if Walmart chooses to sell this product, and we don't know that they do, but if they did, then there would be displayed this following language, which alerts people that there is a prohibition on the PAH applications within the city. So there is an opportunity to still sell the product, but we're prohibiting the application, and if it is sold, then there's a notice that needs to be displayed.
Are we able to prohibit the sale?
And what we did here is we took an existing ordinance, modified it for the city. One of the things that the city administrator and I talked about but didn't research in depth is the Commerce Clause of the Constitution and how that would affect the city's ability to prohibit the sale of an otherwise lawful product within the city. And so what we chose to do in this instance was use an ordinance that had already been enacted by another municipality with the similar language allowing the sale, which we think is then tied to the Commerce Clause.
So we really can't prohibit it?
I haven't researched it in depth. This is the safer approach. If you really want to prohibit it, I would do some legal research and come back with an answer.
Any other comments? If we did, Alderman Hanson, want to go that route, we certainly could amend the ordinance at a later date.
I guess my point is if we're gonna say in here that we're gonna application and sale of it, I would suggest if we could limit it or prohibit it, we should do that. But obviously, it's something that we shouldn't be doing right now without checking into it more.
Any other comments? Clerk will call the roll on the motion, ordinance number 16, please.
Hanson,
Yes.
Fernsler.
Yes.
Sedlacek,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Gilson,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Odeker,
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Motion carried, thank you. Ordinance number 17, an ordinance amending section 15-3-1 of the municipal code of the city of Plymouth, Wisconsin regarding grievances regarding access to public buildings by handicapped persons. City Administrator Yurgis, you want to start us off on that, please?
Yeah, I guess this issue was initially identified by Director Austin as an ordinance that needs to be updated. In the ordinance, we have the Director of Public Works listed as the ADA coordinator. That is not correct in how the current practice is. we have the human resources specialist serving in that ADA capacity. And so, based on that, we made a request to the city attorney to update the ordinance for that small change. When Attorney Feber was looking at that ordinance, there were a few things which were just out of date, or out of reference anymore. And so those additional sections that are struck through are changes that she made. But the primary reason for the ordinance update is just to reflect that the ADA coordinator for the city is really the HR specialist.
Any additional comments, Attorney Fever, before we,
No additional comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Sizlacek.
motion to approve ordinance number 17.
Second, Alder Hanson.
We have a first and a second. Any additional questions or comments? Clerk will call the roll, please, for
Yep.
ordinance number 17.
Hildebrand,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Bernsler,
Yes.
Odekirk,
Yes.
Gilson,
Yes.
Sedlacek,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Motion carried, thank you. Moving on to item 6, resolutions. Resolution number 30, a resolution of the Common Council of the City of Plymouth amending Plymouth Utilities sewer utility rates and regulations to update the hookup fee rate schedule. Administrator Yurgis?
Yeah, I think it's
please.
just easier if I talk from here tonight. You have the paper copy, and then it's on here as well. And sometimes the keyboard here, when I want to advance the slide, doesn't communicate. This is something we talked in depth at Public Works and Utilities Committee. I have a presentation I'm going to walk through, but the primary purpose is primarily make sure that the city of Plymouth adopts a method on our sewer connection fee of how we came up with that calculation, and then update that fee. The proposal that came out of committee was to make the adjustment effective for the year 2021. A little bit of background is our financial strategy. The kind of three legs of the stool is to optimize rates, diversify revenues, deleverage, and asset utilization. Underneath the diversify revenues, we had identified two things related to the sewer utility a number of years ago. One is to create rates and accept holding tank and septic tank waste service. That has been approved by the council and has been in place for a couple of years. And then the second thing was to create a sewer utility connection fee or hookup fee. And basically in the bubble there, the idea was to enhance or improve generational equity in that it's intended to recover at least a portion of the cost of constructing utility system capacity or sewer system capacity, in this case for new customers, where basically new customers pay for additional capacity. Growth pays for growth. And so that's kind of been part of our financial strategy. And back in 2016, the council approved the initial hookup fee. And that hookup fee is on that schedule where a typical residential home has a hookup fee of $250, and then commercial business might have a 1-inch meter, and then that rate is $500, and so forth, and goes up to 3-inch and above. Most, since this was put in place, I think pretty much everyone has been either a 2-inch or below to date. In terms of revenue for the utility in 2017, over $30,000 in revenue. In 2018 and 19, approximately $5,000. Pretty much all of that 18 and 19 revenue, almost all of it has been single-family homes for the $250. In 2017, the reason why it was a significant number is you may recall the 96 apartments on Hillendale Road. Each unit was charged the $250. And so that, because they have separate meters for the units, and so that's why there was a high revenue in that year. In terms of, now this is brand new, just a couple weeks ago, every couple of years, MSA Professional Services does a statewide survey of sewer utilities. And so this came, actually, it was either late October or early November. And currently, that green bar shows the percentage of communities by population of those communities that have a sewer hookup or sewer connection fee. For communities between 5,000 and 10,000, 50% of communities have a sewer connection fee. And then more than 10% have an impact fee. And then statewide average is looks like it's maybe 55% of utilities have this connection fee as a revenue generator for the sewer utility. And this information, again, is from that statewide survey. And then this just shows what the average kind of sewer connection fee is, and then the next page will show the real dollars. But you can see on the right-hand column, or the right graph, where there's all those orange dots and a blue line, you can see for communities of 5,000 to 10,000 that the distribution is, you know, anywhere from a small dollar amount all the way up to close to $8,000 that they charge per sewer connection fee. And you can see that there's a wide range of rates. And then on the left-hand chart with the green bars and the line item, you can see that in general for that 5,000 to 10,000 community, that the average is more than $2,000. And then this chart is a little bit better, and you see the exact dollar amounts. Again, for communities in 5,000 to 10,000, the high charge was $7,490 was the highest that a community charged. The average was $2,200 for our population category. So the reason why I included this is so we see what the trends are statewide. So you see what the fees are that communities are generating or are charging for those that have a sewer connection fee. And again, MSA Professional Services does that every few years. On this slide, the reason why we're kind of talking about this is again, you know, quite a long time, going all the way back to 1965. There was a Jordan versus Village of Menominee Falls court case, and basically it challenged the validity of fees that the Village of Menominee Falls was charging. And kind of that paragraph there, the validity of the fees was upheld provided they were reasonable. To comply with the standard of reasonableness, a municipal fee related to services like water and sewer must not require newly developed properties to bear more than their equitable share of the capital cost in relation to benefits conferred. The municipality should disclose the basis of its calculations to whoever challenges the reasonableness of its subdivision or water hookup fees. Once the municipality has made such a disclosure, the burden of showing failure to comply with constitutional standards of reasonableness is on the challengers. So one of the things that a community can't do is just take a dollar amount and just say we're going to increase the fee by 3% annually with no justification for that, how that fee is determined. So basically, you know, we need to be cognizant that, you know, we should have a good justification for the fees that we come up with. And so that's kind of why we're here, just kind of want to revisit this connection fee and make sure that that's clear to everybody how it's calculated. In terms of how you come up with a fee for something like this, there's kind of three different methods or three different ways to do that. Starting way at the right, or maybe way on the left, is what's called the buy-in method. So you base fees based on the cost of the existing utility system, and so that's looking at historical costs and then coming up with a fee. This is typically done where systems have ample capacity to sell capacity. An incremental or forward-looking would be a wastewater treatment plant or sewer system that doesn't have capacity and is planning on making some large capital additions to either their wastewater plant or several lift stations, And so they're factoring in not only current costs, but forward costs that are anticipated because they have infrastructure financing requirements to meet needs. And then the third option is a combined method where you kind of look at the buy-in method and incremental approach and combine those together to come up with a rate. So that's kind of the three methodologies in how you set the fee. And then, so one of the initial questions is does Plymouth have how much capacity does the city have in our sewer system? And so this chart, little chart and description, comes from something called the Self-Assessment for Wastewater Treatment Plant Optimization, American Water Works Association, and there's kind of, we're talking kind of at a high level, the entire treatment plant, but there's kind of three different types. So type 1 is process capacity is adequate, rated capacity exceeds 100% annual average flow. So what that is saying is that the average flow that the treatment plant is treating exceeds or the capacity exceeds the annual average flow rate. The second one basically indicates that the rated capacity is between 90% to 100% of annual average flow rate, so it shows that there's a little bit of a capacity issue, but there's not a huge issue. And then 3 would be where process capacity is too small to meet performance goals. The capacity of the plant is less than 90% of the average flow that is coming into the plant, and so major construction is required. Now, just a note, if you did a full facility assessment of your wastewater treatment plant, you would look at it at an overall processing capacity, but there can be things that impact specific process parts. For example, if we decided that phosphorus was going to be treated through a filter system at the treatment plant, we would have to make sure that that filter system, as part of the overall process, would meet the phosphorus requirements. So capacity is looked at as from a individual processing perspective, but overall the entire treatment plant. So the question, is for the council is, well, how much capacity do we have, and what is the status of the wastewater treatment plant? The bottom line, kind of that dark red line, so the bottom one is the average annual influent flow to the treatment plant compared to design capacity, and essentially the 10-year average is saying that our treatment plant is receiving basically 75% of what its rated capacity is. So we're using 75% of our capacity. And I just threw this up there just to see if there was a difference, and I should have thought about it because there really isn't. The other thing is once you hit a 90% factor where you're using 90% of your treatment capacity, you may start looking at expanding your treatment plant or maybe individual processes. And even if you look at it at a 90% perspective, that 10-year average is 85% roughly, and so there's still 15% growth that could happen. So what that tells us, overall, in short, what this tells us is there's plenty of capacity at the treatment plant to deal with additional inflow to the treatment plant. And the other thing to note is over that period, and you'll go back and you'll notice that it's not linear, right? There's peaks and valleys. Part of that can be driven by weather. But it's not like going on an incline. So as the community is growing, we're not seeing capacity, decrease substantially, even though between that same time period, property value in the city grew by 11.5%. So property value grew by close to 12%, but really overall our capacity hasn't really decreased much. So the key takeaway is that the wastewater treatment has additional capacity, and the other thing to note that there's always unknowns because future plant upgrade costs due to environmental uncertainty could occur, such as PFAS or phosphorus could require us to make major upgrades for our treatment plant. But absent from those environmental regulations, we have plenty of capacity. So that leads us to doing the buy-in method or backward-looking, where the fee is based on the cost of constructing the existing utility system, because our system has ample capacity to sell. And so the simple formula for that is, what is the value of the system, our wastewater treatment plant and sewer system, subtract a credit, and then you divide that by system capacity to get ERU or equivalent residential units. So that's kind of the formula. To get there, in terms of the value of the system, we use the net book value approach, which is the original construction cost, less accumulated depreciation. So that's called the net book value approach. And the policy proposal that was approved at committee includes the wastewater treatment plant, our lift stations, and general assets of the sewer utility, but it does not include the value of our sewer collection system in terms of sewer main. And the policy decision on that was because when we have a residential subdivision, that sewer main is dedicated back to the city of Plymouth, and those sewer mains are in the cost of a lot that a homeowner buys. So they're already paying for their sewer main in the cost of a lot, so we decided not to include sewer main in part of this net book value approach. And so, the plant value is 14.9 million, accumulated depreciation of 10.3 million. We get a system value of 4.6 million. Again, that's our wastewater treatment plant, general assets, not including, collection main, and then our lift stations. And then, was there a credit? The credit would be less, debt service and any contributions. Well, our wastewater treatment plant is completely paid off, so there are no credits to offer. So the next piece of the puzzle is system capacity. And if we use the system capacity and say we're gonna look at it at a 90% design factor, so our plant can handle about 2.3 million gallons per day. 90% is roughly 2 million gallons. You multiply that by 365 days, you get 733 million gallons. Divide that by 12, roughly the plant can handle 61 million gallons on a monthly basis. And then, so how do you take it to an ERU? Well, the average residential water rate customer uses 6 units of water. A unit of water is 100 cubic feet. So you take 600 cubic feet and convert that to gallons, because this number for the wastewater treatment plant is shown in gallons. And so taking 6 units of water, that turns into 4,488 gallons an average residential customer uses on a monthly basis. So then what you do is you take the 61 million gallons divided by that 4,400 gallons, and you get total ERU capacity in the system of 13,600 ERUs. I know this is exciting stuff, but I'm gonna try to hurry up and go through that. So, in summary, the method that we approved at committee was to take the net book value of 4.6 million and divide that by the system capacity of 13,600 ERUs to get an ERU rate of $340, which is what the rate would be for a single family home. Okay, currently that fee is $250, so there's a $90 difference. The next part of it is is to scale that ERU appropriately based on size of meter, and you do that by looking at the meter capacity. So a typical residential meter is the 5/8 or 3/4 inch meter that can handle 20 gallons per minute. So and then a 1 inch meter can handle 50 gallons per minute. So the capacity factor is 2.5 times that of a residential meter. And so you you take that meter capacity and turn it into a capacity ratio, continuing all the way to, in our case, we did it to a 12-inch size, even though we don't have any customers on 12-inch. But it's possible we could someday. So then, you apply that, to the rates, and what that would do is it would show that the residential customer, we already talked about it being $340. A 1-inch meter would be $850. A 1.5-inch meter would be, $1,700. And then a 2-inch meter would be $2,700, and it goes all the way down through those meter capacity. And that would be how we would scale it, based on scaling the RUO. And then it compares that versus what is authorized. And like I had mentioned, pretty much all of our development in the last 10 years has all been, I think, 3-inch or lower. So those, even though there's a higher dollar amount, where it shows a 6-inch, 8-inch, 10-inch, and you see $17,000, $27,000, $40,000, those are high dollar amounts. But the likelihood of ever charging that is pretty small, because we just don't see that size of development. So ultimately, what the committee recommended was adoption of the method and the rates as presented, constructing the rates on a 90% design factor for influent flow, and making the rates effective January 1, 2021. So that's the quick summary of the calculation, how we came up with it, and then just a note, periodically, just like our other rate tariffs and sewer and utility rates, we should be reviewing these rates and making sure that the methodology is fair and equitable and is representative of the capital investment made at the sewer utility.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. It's a long discussion, but certainly one that needs to be calculated to substantiate the purpose behind what we're doing. With that, the chair will entertain a motion on resolution number 30 as indicated and explained.
Motion to approve.
Second, Whitaker.
We have a first and a second. Any questions? Discussion? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Gilson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Odekirk,
Yes.
Hildebrand,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Fernsler, Sedlacek,
Yes.
and Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Good explanation, Brian. Moving on to item 7, no items were removed from the consent agenda, therefore it's not needed. Moving on to item 8. 8A, discussion and possible action regarding the 2011 CURB refinancing. I'll ask Administrator Yurgis for a brief explanation on that.
I thought I was over my cough and laryngitis, but I see it's coming back again tonight. We've talked about this a little bit, but basically, we're looking at approving refinancing of our 2011 combined utility revenue debt. So I'll go through some slides just for the newer council members. There's 2 ways that the city borrows money. One on a general obligation debt purpose. When we borrow on a GO basis, we're pledging the full faith and credit of the city's taxing authority, which is basically the property tax. The second way we borrow money is on a revenue basis, and that revenue basis is tied to a specific revenue, and think of it in terms of pledging our water, sewer, and electric revenues to paying back that debt, but not necessarily pledging the full faith and credit of the city in terms of our taxing authority. Typically, revenue debt has a higher cost of interest because it's a little bit more risky because it's sensitive to revenues from a user system. Again, kind of reference the financial strategy, which we've talked about in the past, but underneath the deleverage and asset utilization, one of the strategies we put in going all the way back to really 2012 was we said to use geo capacity for debt refinancing based on debt capacity and future borrowing needs for the city. Previously, we've refinanced utility revenue debt 4 other times, in 2012, 13, 14, and 15, and flipped that revenue debt to general obligation debt. So we have done that, 4 previous times, and that's something we're talking about doing again with this issue. Just for the council's information, this shows the debt schedule. So basically, from now on through the 2020 to 2031, the debt payment currently is roughly $500,000, and the interest rate of this issue is between 4% and 4.375% on our outstanding debt on this issue. With that being said, a significant portion is related to Plymouth Utilities and our new operations center. And this next slide just shows what amount is related to the operations center. And it's about 370,000 of that roughly, call it, is related to that. The second purpose that bond was issued for was projects within tax incremental finance district number 6. And so that's this slide. And that shows that, call it 135,000 or so is associated to TIF 6. So when we refinance this, part of the savings is for TIF number 6, but a part of the savings that would be for the utilities. And then also, what this shows is, just for the council's information, this shows total long-term liabilities at year end of the given year, and that includes principal and interest on that top line. The second line is just the principal amount, and then the lower line just shows the total long-term liabilities for interest payments. And so really in 2011, our total long-term liabilities topped out at $60 million for the city. Fast forward all the way to 2018, and our long-term liabilities are currently underneath 28 million. Now, the reason why it's decreased is because we've made annual principal and interest payments, but we've also taken advantage of interest rates and refinanced debt various times. Interest as a percentage of debt liabilities, back in 2017, out of our total debt liabilities, principal and interest, 28% was associated to interest. The other was principal. That doesn't mean we were paying a 28% interest rate, because just like with your home mortgage, when you first make those home mortgage payments, most of that debt payment, it goes to interest and only a little bit toward principal. And as you pay that loan down, the interest becomes smaller and principal becomes a larger amount of that monthly mortgage. So the same thing is true here, although I note that in 2012, 13, 14, and 15, we saw a noticeable decrease in the percentage associated to interest as a percentage of debt liabilities, partly because of those prior refinancings and what we did with flipping the revenue debt to geo debt. Also, for the newer council members, we do have a financial and investment policy that deals with debt, and we say that general obligation debt shall not exceed 60% of the city's legal debt. So our legal debt capacity is 5% of equalized value, and so 60% is really 3% of equalized value. And then we say under no circumstances except for case of an extreme emergency shall the city exceed more than 80% of the city's debt capacity, or 4% of equalized value. So we've had that policy in place probably 8 or 9 years ago is when we initially adopted it. And we did exceed that 80% for one brief period when we refinanced that revenue debt to GO. One of the issues, we exceeded that for a very brief period. If you look at the Ellers handout, you should have that in your packet. And if you look at the kind of the back side, you'll find this sheet. it says existing debt service to be refunded in the top left corner, and then it compares it on a revenue basis and a geo basis. Essentially, if we decide, if you do it on a revenue basis, the estimated savings is roughly $430,000. If you do it on a geo basis, the estimated savings is $570,000. So about $140,000 more, which is 32 or 33% more savings if we refinance the debt on a geo. But again, you do use your geo capacity by refinancing it. And I looked at it very, very conservatively, but looking at it on a conservative basis, I'm not gonna go through each line item, but essentially if we didn't refinance this to geo debt, we'd be using approximately 38% of our debt capacity. If we refinance to geo, we're basically using 48% of our capacity. But that percentage goes down dramatically. In Ellers does it a little bit different, because what they do is in that first column after the year where it says projected equalized value TID in, they always include an escalator value and say that our equalized value base is gonna grow. I always do it on a conservative basis, but no matter how you look at it, if we refinance it, you know, we're only using roughly 47% of our debt capacity in 2020, and then over the next couple of years, it drops down dramatically, and then technically, if we borrowed no additional funds, basically in 2031, we'd basically be debt-free. So I already referenced the Ellers spreadsheet. I'm not gonna go over that again, but, and I'm not gonna read that lengthy statement, but basically, we have plenty of debt capacity. We've done this 4 other times. My recommendation would be to refinance the 2011 curb on a geo basis and allow me to work with Ellers and bond counsel to move that financing forward.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Administrator Yurgis. Chair will entertain a motion so we can discuss on the possible action regarding the 2011 CURB refinancing as explained.
Mayor,
Alderman Sizlacek.
I'd like to make a motion to have city staff get into negotiations with Ellers to refinance the 2011 curb
Second,
a geo basis.
on a geo basis.
Correct.
second Alder Nelson.
We have a first and a second to proceed with the refinancing of the curb on a geo basis. Any discussion? Questions? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Wilson,
Yes.
Sedlacek.
Yes.
Birnsler.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Gilson.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Odekirk.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Good explanation, Brian. 8B, approved generator purchase for City Hall from Generac Generator in the amount of $23,230. Department of Public Works Director Kathy Austin, please, would you explain that to us?
Sure, to complete the 2019 capital improvement plan, one of the last projects is the replacement of the generator here at City Hall. The current generator was installed in the 1980s, and so part of the project, I believe, we did walk through and show some of the council members the existing generator. So this is step 1. This is just the purchase of the generator. This is not installation or anything else. It's just the unit itself. And then we'll come back with a contractor installation. I've had difficulties getting anyone to provide me quotes on it, probably the time of the year. But so we'll continue to do that and get you the bids in the beginning of 2020, but still using 2019 funds for that. So I did get 2 quotes. One was a Generac generator and one was a Kohler generator. They're both high quality generators, so I would making the recommendation to purchase the Generac generator from Walter Group.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion so we can discuss.
Motion to approve purchase of the generator.
Second, O'Decker.
We have a first and a second to approve the Generac generator for the amount of $23,230. Any discussion? Would this $23,000, Director Austin, come out of capital dollars set aside for this?
Yes.
Any other questions? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Gilson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Odekirk,
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Birnsler, Sedlacek,
Yes.
and Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85 paren 1 paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Salary Resolution 31 and Assistant Electrical Operations Manager.
Move that we go into closed session?
Second, Aldous LaPlante.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Okay, let the record show that we are back in open session. Moving on to item 11, discussion and possible action on closed session item. Alderman Nelson, you wanted to make a motion?
The first motion is that I would move that we make, authorize the offer of a conditional offer of employment to Nick Whipple to become the Assistant Electrical Operations Manager / electrical engineer at a rate of $92,000 per year.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll on the first motion.
Sedlacek.
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Gilson.
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Odekirk,
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Birnsler.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Next motion is to accept the amended resolution number 31 regarding the 2020 compensation for non-union employees. And the amendments being, first of all, on page 3, under journeyman lineman, the rate of pay would become $39.00 on 1st of January 2020. And then on the 1st of July 2020, it would become $39.50. Apprentice lineman 4 would be $35.25 on January 1st, 2020, and $35.75 on July 1st, 2020. Apprentice lineman 3 would be $34.25 on January 1st and $34.75 on July 1st. Apprentice lineman 2 would be $33.25 on January 1st, $33.75 on July 1st. Apprentice lineman 1 would be $32.58 on January 1st and $32.75 on July 1st. And electric meter technician 2 would be $32 for 2020. The other part of this resolution is to provide a performance bonus to the city administrator for $18,000 for this year, coming out of the 2019 contingency fund.
Second, Alderman Sedlacek.
Thank you. We have a first and a second on the second motion. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Odekirk,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Sedlacek.
Yes.
Gilson,
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Birnsler,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Motion carried. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move, Alder Hanson.
Second, Elder Ryan.
We have a first and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Merry Christmas. See you in January.